take it off entirely, but I should have taken Juneteenth off. Like I appreciate the holiday. I understand what it means. I understand the history there and the value of that. But I think as a business owner, you can probably appreciate this as well, Charlie. Like, there are holidays that you probably should take off, but instead you kind of just take your laptop to the pool or to
Yeah,
the
it's so true.
yard, or right.
Catch
You're
up
kind
on
of working
email.
through the holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. In retrospect, I should have just taken the day fully off yesterday. So many others were offline. But yeah, definitely a day of catch up emails for me and a couple internal meetings. So we know what to do next year.
Well, what I did notice, and I'd love to know if you notice the same thing. So from a email inbound, right, coming into
Yeah.
me standpoint, I think this year far less email
Oh, yeah.
coming, certainly from corporate, than last year. But from in the vendor space and the small biz space, and maybe this just backs up what I was saying, but like still getting the same, notes, still getting the same outreach.
All the automated sequences are still firing, but it is funny running a startup when you realize that your customers aren't working and your investors aren't working. You're the only one that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, it's just you. It's just
Yeah.
you working. You're the only
Okay.
one working today.
Take that feedback. I can learn.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, we're going to talk pay transparency today. I'm excited to bring you back to the show. Are you ready to jump into it?
Let's get into it. There's a lot to talk about.
All right, we're live. Let's get started. Here we go.
Welcome to the CXR channel, our premier podcast for talent acquisition and talent management. Listen in as the CXR community discusses a wide range of topics focused on attracting, engaging, and retaining the best talent. We're glad you're here.
All right, watchers and listeners, thank you for coming back to the show. We are live today. We do this, hopefully, we try to do this every week. As a reminder, this is the Recruiting Community Podcast. I am Chris Hoyt. I'm going to be your host of this water cooler chat for the next 20 minutes or so. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you'll join in with us. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, a couple of different places where you see a live chat stream or a live chat box next to it, jump in. You can ask a question of our guest that's going to be on today as we welcome him back to the show. You can ask a question of us, or if you dare, you can drop in your social media profile link, do a little bit of networking and check in, or just say hi. Sometimes we stop the whole show just to say hi back to you. Anyway, these are 20-minute chats with folks who we really think are doing cool work in the space and that we think warrant some of your attention. This is not, nobody pays to be on the show. We don't have, happy Tuesday to you too, Sarah. We don't have any type of pay to play or advertisements or sponsorship. So this is just a labor of love. We do a conversation with folks that are doing cool stuff. And with that, I want to bring in the next guest that we brought in today. Not his first time on the show. Welcoming back Charlie Franklin. Charlie, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Chris. How you doing today?
Good. Good to see you. You're in a different setting today than I normally see you.
You know, I got 2 kids now, and so I got kicked out of my office. So kind of surrounded by nursery stuff wherever I go, but a little more space over here.
I had an interesting chat with a gentleman today. He's got some real life family stuff going on. They're doing some potty training at their home, and I just, we've all got crap we have to deal with, but that's the kind of crap that I'm excited that I don't have to hear again.
I took work so seriously in some ways before I had kids, and little did I know that all my colleagues who are older than me that I looked up to were dealing with that stuff in the background. So it's humbling to prioritize family alongside work and kind of fun too.
I have to so I'll do a confession here. This has nothing to do with the show. When I was a very young recruiter and people had to work from home and I didn't have kids yet and I didn't really understand it. When I would hear a dog barking at it, this is like almost 30 years ago, a dog barking in the background or a baby crying, there was a part of me that was like, get your professional act together. I don't want to hear, we shouldn't hear your family stuff in the background. It's a 180 today.
Yeah, you had no idea. Seriously.
Yeah. No clue what I was thinking. I'm like, why was I now a dog runs in the back or a baby's running by yelling, I've got fire. Like anything could be going on in the background. And now I'm like, that's okay. It's 2023.
No, it's so true. And just that there's so much more integration of how your time's spent between personal life and work life. I remember when I was in the corporate world, I would hear some of our executives say things along the lines of, sometimes when I'm taking a shower, an important idea will come to me about something I want to do with the product or the team. And There's so much truth to that. Really, whenever you're thinking about work and processing, you are, and being respectful of people's different schedules and commitments, family or otherwise. It's just, it's 2023. That's what we do.
It is. So 2023. So that's going to bring us to the topic today. We're going to talk about pay transparency. But Charlie, for those who don't know you, who haven't had the pleasure to get to know you a little bit or learn about what you do and what Compa is, can you give us sort of a escalator pitch? Like who is Charlie Franklin, and why should we be paying attention to what you say today?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, hey all who haven't met, my name's Charlie Franklin. I am co-founder and CEO of Compa. My background is as a compensation person, not a recruiter, but I worked with lots of talent acquisition teams. I was most recently at Workday prior to founding Compa. And really, what we're all about at Compa is marrying the worlds of talent acquisition and compensation through data and software. When I was a compensation leader, I, of course, interacted with my talent acquisition team, but it was limited and fairly focused to dealing with unusual executive hires, maybe the occasional offer exception. And for recruiters out there, that the big miss that I had that is obvious to all of you is that recruiters are out there every day interfacing with the talent marketplace, including talking about compensation, which of course has only accelerated in this era of pay transparency. But even a few years ago, compensation teams are just constantly scraping for ways to find out what's going on in the market, to get great sources of data, get a competitive advantage, make sure that you're bringing those insights into meetings with the C-suite, with the comp committee of the board to set pay strategy, set equity strategy if you're in tech. Um, I guess what I'm saying is I could have been listening to the talent acquisition team the whole time. And there's so many examples I can point to in my corporate life and comp where we were trying to orchestrate some shift in our compensation strategy that have been accelerated through tighter alignment and collaboration with talent acquisition. So what we're all about is really taking advantage of the sort of overlapping interests and alignment in incentives between these two organizations, with comp people trying to set pay strategy and steward corporate resources, and recruiters to oversimplify it, really trying to get the best butts and seats as fast as possible. And so our software helps them do exactly that, as well as kind of aggregate some important insights the recruiters see in the market every day to serve back to comp teams to set
Yeah.
comp strategy. So
So let's level set a little bit, Charlie. So
yeah.
can you sort of explain for listeners and watchers? Can you kind of explain when we say pay transparency? Can you explain maybe what that is and why is it such a hot topic in recruitment today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, pay transparency, it's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. It can be hard to define it or pin someone down and say, what exactly is this? And that's because pay transparency can kind of mean a lot of things. If you're paying attention to the news today, you're probably thinking about the legislation that
Mhm.
has passed in many states recently, like California, like New York, like Washington, that requires that recruiters and other corporate leaders disclose certain things like salary ranges on job postings, or has prohibitions on asking for things like a candidate's salary history. That is pay transparency, and it's an important piece of it because we all have to be compliant. But there's a bigger picture in the background. The pay transparency movement was born out of really pay equity, and that's an underlying motivation of most of the legislation. Pay equity in terms of, originally from a legal perspective, large organizations getting faced with lawsuits for discriminatory pay, and sort of that evolution towards we need to be more transparent with exactly how pay decisions get made.
Yeah.
And then, to these de facto practices like, hey, asking candidates what they currently make can have this outcome that unfairly affects how people ultimately get offered compensation. But with all that being said, if you take the biggest step back, really what's happening, there's a long-term trend that's accelerating
Mhm.
where compensation is comp practitioners like to say this, hey, compensation's, it's a little bit of art, a little bit of science. that's a euphemism for, we could be a little more precise with how these decisions are getting made, particularly at scale.
Mhm.
There's a shifting social contract between the worker and employer where there's just a higher level of accountability and precision that's expected. And so pay transparency is a shift from secretive and discretionary to more open and accountable, where differences in pay are measurable and objective at scale. And so there's a lot of ways to explain what pay transparency is. I think for recruiters, though, it's really changing how you work every day. And that's where we help focus in with TA teams, make sure they're keeping up with all the change.
So I understand the premise. I love the art and science reference because that I want to put a pin in that for just the industry of recruiting, right? Arguments for all things mystery, but there are arguments, Charlie, like against pay transparency. So with fears of decreased motivation, or from a competitive standpoint, even increased conflict among employees, right? Because you've got compression as a sort of a downstream impact of a big piece of this. So how would you, or how would your organization maybe respond to those concerns?
Yeah, you can't just sort of rip the Band-Aid and make all these changes overnight, because shift in the shift that pay transparency drives, it starts with the underlying data, it moves into the corporate processes, and then ultimately communication. And there's a cultural component to this too. And bear that in mind. Pay transparency feels very new, maybe a little scary in the United States. This
Sure.
is nothing new in other parts of the world. And I always cite an example when I was at Juniper Networks, that the largest R&D site at Juniper, at least at the time, and I believe still today, is in Bangalore in India. And I visited there a number of times and chatted with the employees on our compensation team there. It's pretty common to share what you make. Like if you go to a neighbor's barbecue and ask, what's your title, how much money you make, that's not considered rude. And so bear in mind, there's an underlying cultural piece here. And you have to take that into account as you make a transition towards pay transparency. I would say for organizations that have fears around what's going to be the positive or negative impact here, it's absolutely right to think about pay transparency as a communication problem.
Mhm.
But the broader problem underneath it is about trust. And if you're not taking proactive steps to build a culture in your organization of accountability around, let's say your managers have discretion over what your performance-based pay increase is, that shouldn't be a popularity contest. There should be objective criteria that underlie that's communicated clearly to employees so they understand, here's what I'm being paid and why. Compensation, it's a basic need. This is affecting people's life at home. You've got to get it right. It's not just words on a wall. This is people's paychecks. And so that's what I would say is it's a journey. You've got to take the underlying cultural implications into account, depending on where in the world you're executing it. But it's not going anywhere. This thing is here. The laws are only accelerating. More and more companies are opening up.
Yeah, you referenced the United States. I've been talking to a lot of recruiting leaders lately, especially who are looking for work. Right, they're on to their next adventure. They're in transition for this challenge that they've got in front of them, and a lot of them are talking about these ridiculous ranges, or no pay information at all. And I have a theory, and I'd love your expertise to weigh in this. I have a theory. I know that we have legislature that's been put into place that requires that we list in various areas, cities, states, the salary for particular roles, or ranges for particular roles. Yet we're not seeing that widely adopted across the board. We're still in like the 20 something percentile. You probably have a more recent number than I do of organizations that have listed a range of pay, a reasonable range of pay. And I think we're not going to see mass adoption on that until somebody gets a fine, until the teeth, right, that we're expected of this, or that have been threatened, really sink into a big organization. Then I think we're going to start seeing it take off. Do you see that differently?
I actually completely agree. And my perspective on this comes from, this is sort of a wonky corner of the world of compensation, but executive compensation has lots of transparency laws in place, and it has for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is those laws were written in vague enough terms, it's hard to know exactly how to comply with it. Maybe there's, an incentive not to comply with it in the spirit of the law,
Mhm.
and it really takes somebody getting sued. And you know who it is. It's going to be one of the big guys. And then we'll all sort of look to how the courts interpret that lawsuit to set precedent. With that being said, look, I'll bring quite a bit of empathy to the recruiting ops teams and the compensation ops teams that are trying to figure this out. For most HR teams who are ushering in pay transparency, they really only started this project 6 months ago when these laws went into effect in California, New York, and Washington. And so they're just figuring it out. It's early innings. We see goofy stuff like gigantic ranges. I'll tell you one of the reasons that's happening, recruiters, which I'm sure is frustrating. It's nuanced, but it's important. A lot of companies have geo-based compensation where, let's say, you get paid X in New York, you get paid Y in Nebraska because there's
Right.
different labor markets, but they'll post a role with multiple locations. And so it sounds like a goofy, like, couldn't you just like show a different range for the different tiers? It's like, yeah, you probably could, but that's the kind of thing that they're figuring out. So absent that, they're just artificially showing a minimum that reflects the very bottom of Nebraska and a maximum that reflects the very top of New York. And then add to that, a lot of times when you're hiring a role, you don't know what level it's going to be until you talk to the candidate. And so it can also reflect multiple levels. So the result is you get these goofy ranges. And this is the kind of thing I guarantee you, 6, 9, 12 months out from now, this is going to get ironed out. At least the best companies are going to have figured it out.
It would be interesting. So the Vegas traveler in me wants to do a betting board and what company's going to take the first bullet, right? Is it going to be one of the Fortune organizations? Is it going to be somebody who was too snarky to the lawmakers? Is it like what's going to come into play for that?
Exactly. I mean, there's so many companies that are doing this badly that you take your pick. I think it's whoever the lawmaker is going to feel like pulling over for a speeding ticket that day.
So it is funny to me. So there is this element of being really worried about, well, what does it mean when we show our rate of pay? But you and I have had a couple of talks around, and we've actually done some coursework. We should talk about that. But we've done some coursework on pay transparency as a competitive advantage. So
That's right.
yeah. So can you share what that means to you? Like, how is being transparent, seen as an advantage when you're recruiting, when a lot of recruiters coming back going, I put this range up here and people are out, like nobody wants to talk about it, that range is too big, my company won't let me. Like, how can we shift how that's sort of looked at by the recruiting industry?
Yeah, so that's exactly right, Chris. So here's the deal, recruiters. I'm going to make an analogy that compares you to sales folks, and I know there's limits to that, but this is important. The more you talk about compensation earlier and often in the process, the more likely you are to disqualify
Mhm.
unqualified candidates faster. So you can run your process more efficiently. But then additionally, by pulling up the conversation about pay in the recruiting process, you're going to build trust earlier on. It's a terrible feeling for a candidate when they're progressing through all the interview stages and then they get to the offer and it's a surprise in the wrong way. And
Yeah.
then you get to this sort of heated negotiation with a big time pressure piece. If you use pay transparency to your advantage, you can not only use that to really have a better outcome targeting candidates at the top of your funnel, but then through each progressive conversation as they move through the candidate workflow and process, you can better and better illuminate, what is it that they care about? Is it a base salary or is it a bonus or their walk away stock that they need to get paid out for? Explain how your programs work. How do you set strategy against the market for salaries? How do you think about benefits, right? Like, get to a place where when it's time to make an offer, you have
Mhm.
so much valuable input to craft a win-win package that it will be within your guidelines and get approved, is fair compared to what other employees make, and meets the needs for this candidate. And in all those ways, as a recruiter, I just think pay transparency has elevated the role. You're more of this trusted financial advisor to candidates who are making these gigantic personal finance decisions, and you are the voice of the organization for what your compensation strategy is. That's always been true. It's only even truer now with pay
Yeah.
transparency.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think having been a recruiter myself and having led recruiters, I think the earlier you can have that conversation and the expectations and done in the right way, because there are things you can't say anymore, you can't ask anymore with regards to what somebody's current salary is. I think that does establish, you're right on the money, Troy, it does establish a trust And in essence, it betters the candidate experience. I think it elevates your legitimacy as a partner in that process. And I think you used the word just now, but advisor. So when we talked for at least a decade about everyone becoming talent advisors and not just transactional recruiters, but I think this lends itself in that direction that says, look, I know what I'm talking about. I know the role. I know the comp for this. And if it's not a fit for you, if it's not enough comp, we can establish that early on. And I'm still going to have a relationship with you downstream, right? To move towards other roles or when we do have comp in a range that you need for your lifestyle.
That's exactly right. And with all the salary ranges posted on job postings, know what your competitors are doing too. Know what, there's going to be some areas where you're weaker. There's going to be a lot of areas where you're stronger. And so if it's a competitive candidate who, is talking to, some of your top talent competitors, having that type of insight to really just show how you're differentiated and see whether that's aligned with the candidate is just going to serve you. And they're going to find this out eventually. It's better to find it out sooner and be a part of the conversation versus wondering what they're saying back home to their family.
And I've made that mistake I've made that mistake as a recruiter too. You don't talk about it till the end. You thought you had a candidate, the hiring manager thinks it's all done. And it's like, yeah, no, we're not paying it. And then you got to have the argument back in the office about, should you pay them more? Where do you get the money from?
You never had a deal in the first place. Yeah. You just didn't know it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there's two things I do want to talk about before we get on. I know we're at about the 20-minute mark. We've done this coursework together. So your team has done, in my humble but correct opinion, a phenomenal job at the content behind this course. I'm going to see if I can actually pull up. You want to talk a little bit about this? I mean, we've made it free to our members. Any CXR members can actually take a look at it. I'll throw it on the screen if you want to talk a little bit about sort of what went behind that.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, our big contribution, I guess, to the world on pay transparency is our belief that this has a huge impact on recruiters. Recruiters are on the front lines of pay transparency. The new legislation that's coming online directly affects how they do their jobs day to day. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the need for recruiters to have mastery over how the compensation strategy is defined, how benefits work, understanding how to pull out things that matter most to candidates. This is only increased in importance. And so what we thought would be valuable is to put together some coursework to really help usher in this job upgrade for recruiters, where no longer can you be transactional or vaguely familiar with how compensation works generally and at your organization, but you really need to become an expert at it to understand your candidate, to understand your own programs, and make offers that are likely to get approved and win.
Yeah, and if you're watching, I do have it up on the screen, but I just wanted to do a quick shout out, Charlie. I know I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but if I were still a TA leader, Charlie, and I don't think I told you this would 100% be a course that would be required for my recruiters to go through before they could make another offer. The what you can say, can't say, must say, the difference, the explanation of equity and parity when we're talking about pay and comp is fantastic. So I want to give a shout out. Obviously, you're on the screen, Charlie, of course.
Thank you.
April, who did a wonderful job, Bobby, and of course, Zach. These guys were phenomenal in the delivery of it. You guys did the work. Oh, wrong button there. There we go. You guys did the work on this. We packaged it up together to give it to the members and stuff, but it really is just a knockout course. Where did we land? About an hour and a half, I think, total on the course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and we break it up into a few modules to focus on different areas. So, some recruiters are already really strong at this, especially if you've been in the executive recruiting world where you're getting, I remember like the screenshots of E-Trade statements and trying to forensically piece together the stock that someone's walking away from. It's very it can truly get complicated quickly. But for those who are new to this, maybe have been in the broad base, maybe haven't been recruiting nationally, but just for isolated corporate roles in a certain market, this is a big change. And so hopefully you'll find the course as a valuable primer with some areas with an opportunity to go quite a bit deeper.
Yeah, it's a big one. And it was a pleasure to work with you guys to put this piece together for our members. So we're excited about it. Anybody can take the course, just a disclaimer there. Okay, so Charlie, you've also done some work on your own site where you've done some really interesting stuff with regards to sharing what pay transparency is sort of looking like and this calculation and all of the work that you put together. I'll pull that up on the screen as well, because I think people don't know that it's there, then they should. But I want to give you a chance to kind of walk through that, if you will. And I think I've got it pulled up here.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we create and maintain a resource, a focus on pay transparency for recruiters on our website. Chris has it up here. So what we're doing, you can scroll down a bit too and get a sense of this. We're tracking the legislation by state, municipality on what exactly is going on with pay transparency specifically for recruiters. And so, like if you click on California, for example, you'll get a sense of what you must do. So, for example, you have to disclose salary ranges on job postings. What you can do, which is you can ask about someone's pay expectations, for example. And then what you cannot do, and an example of that is ask for someone's current salary. There's a lot of surface area to get confused or go out of compliance, particularly for recruiters who are interviewing candidates across multiple different states, regardless of where your job is posted. There's ways that you could get on the wrong side of this law, which of course nobody wants to do. So for now, there's a patchwork of pay transparency legislation legislation in the United States, and we're just trying to make that easy to navigate. And so this is a free resource. It's available on our website for recruiters or really anyone who's interested to track what the latest is so you can do your jobs better.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the fact, it's like I said before, the must do, can do, cannot do. Fantastic resource. I love this quick check. I also love the way you've kind of broken out the US here with regards to both state and local laws, or whether they're just local laws or just state laws, or if there are laws pending, or as appropriate for Texas, it's just the Wild West. There are some of these in here that just don't have anything cooking yet.
It's too complicated. It's ridiculous, and I think the average recruiter, look, they're just trying to get through it without being out of compliance and learn something along the way about their candidates. And so, if you're getting tangled up, check out that resource, and hopefully in the next few years, we'll get some national pay transparency legislation.
Yeah, I love it. Easiest way to get to it, it's trycompa.com if you're listening and you weren't watching. I think you scroll all the way to the bottom. There is a link in the footer, and it's pay transparency map. Keeping it simple. We appreciate that.
Got it.
You can click on that and go through there. And then how often do you guys update it? Charlie, are you hovered over the keyboard for updates? Or
Yeah, exactly. And there's new laws being proposed going in front of Congress and various states and municipalities all the time. By the way, there's a lot changing around the rest of the world too. Our resource is just tracking the US. But there's change all the time. We're in an acceleration period with these laws getting on the books. So we update it regularly. Check it out. If you see, something that doesn't look right, you can always shoot our team a note, but I'm pretty sure we'll capture it before you do.
Well, and what I did, and we didn't click on it, but there's a link in each of those for the specific legislation, which is just a really great tool. And I think that's handy. A lot of, the more arrows in your quiver as a TA, practitioner, I think the better when you're going back to the business and you're talking to your leadership.
Absolutely. Bring more facts and data to the conversation.
That's it. Trust and verify. Trust but verify. That's what it is.
So,
all right. So, Charlie, we asked this of all of our guests that are on the show. If you're going to write a book about the state of things today, what would the title, Charlie, of that book be?
Oh, man. All right. Let's call it From Radio to Television, the transition into the era of pay transparency. And here's why I call it that, I guess. I think that's exactly what's going on right now is we've just invented the movie camera, and the radio show hosts are still standing in front of the microphone reading the news with the camera pointed at them. Nobody's grasped the profundity of the medium change and how it's going to change how we work, our processes, how we communicate. We're just at the beginning of the pay transparency era. So that's the best title I got for now.
I love that. And not including anybody that's on this stream with us right now, who would you give the first signed copy to?
Oh, man. Oh, let's go. I'll give it to my former boss, Anil Bousri at Workday. He's recommended some great books for me to read. He made every employee at Workday read a book called Prediction Machines, which is the economics of AI. And that was back in 2018 before ChatGPT existed. And so I'll do him a favor and get him a copy so he can keep up with pay transparency.
Prediction Machines. I'm just writing that down, actually. So
it's a good one.
All right. Well, Charlie, thank you so much. We're so grateful for your time. You're a super busy guy. You got a lot about family at home, busy stuff, as well as the work stuff and keeping the industry straight. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks, Chris. Y'all have a terrific community. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. It's fun to be a part of it.
Love the partnership. Love it. I want to say also thank you. We'll do a shout out to Sarah, to Kamel, and to Mary for doing we put you on the screen so listeners might not have seen you, but we love you guys. We're glad you chimed in the chat. With everybody else, I want to remind you, CXR.works. It is the most trusted talent acquisition community in the world that I'm in charge of. So be sure to check that out. And then, of course, we'd encourage you to head to CXR.works/learning. You can check out everything we've got going on there. And if you've got questions, reach out directly. You know where to find us. We put our links up there, and we're happy to connect. And until then, I guess we're going to tell you we'll just see you next week. You want to say goodbye, Charlie?
Thanks, y'all. See you next week. Have a good Tuesday.
Thanks for listening to the CXR channel. Please subscribe to CXR on your favorite podcast resource and leave us a review while you're at it. Learn more about CXR at our website, cxr.works, facebook.com and twitter.com/careercrossroads, and on Instagram @careerxroads. We'll catch you next time.